Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this session that is organized by the Smart Cities Marketplace, the European Innovation Partnerships on Smart Cities and Communities. And we called this session EIP SCC on a Mission. My name is Ilko Kruisinga. I am one of the two matchmaking specialists of the Smart Cities Marketplace team. And the Marketplace is an initiative from the European Commission to build a market of smart city projects. And it is my task to solicit project concepts from cities across Europe and try to match them with our investors that are represented in an investor network. So what we're trying to do is to attract private finance into smart cities who are on a mission of becoming smart, and in this case also climate neutral. And in this session what we want to do is perhaps triangulate this idea of becoming a climate neutral city, the idea of having R&D projects in place that could help cities achieve that mission, and also to have a representation from the private investment community that could help these cities in achieving that mission. So what we have done is organize a panel session with a few esteemed panelists who I will be introducing shortly. And what we are going to do is we're going to let these panelists present their views on this mission idea in a short presentation, 7-8 minutes each. And then we want to organize a panel discussions among the panelists, and we have prepared some key discussion topics. So we have a round of presentations followed by a panel discussion amongst the panelists, and in the meantime you as an audience can pose your questions and we will be looking at those, and you can address them directly to a specific panelist or to the whole panel as a whole, and we will then cover those questions following the panel discussion that we will have in the middle part of this session. Now the lineup for today is quite interesting. So first of all, we have Jens Bartolmes, who is a policy officer with DG Energy, and he represents the European Commission, and he's going to give us a bit of an overview of what is this smart cities marketplace and how does it sit within the wider EC landscape, and plans that the EC might have to advance on the topic of smart cities and link to that climate neutrality. And then we have Emmanuel Forest, who is with Bouygues Group. He's an executive vice president, but he's actually also a member of the so-called Mission Board for Climate Neutral and Smart Cities, which is a group of people who are advising the Commission on, basically on planning their R&D program, on having this, 100 climate neutral cities by the near future. So Emmanuel is going to explain to us what is this mission all about, what is the thinking, and why is there a mission on climate neutral and smart cities, and how does he see, because he actually represents the private sector, the role of the private sector within the fulfillment of that mission. So that's that second element. Then we have Stephen Fawkes, who's actually a director with Energy Pro. He's one of Europe's leading experts on energy efficiency, actually. But I've not asked him to join this panel in that capacity. I've asked him to join the panel in his capacity as an advisor to the so-called Technical Expert Group on Sustainable Finance. You may have heard about that. It's a group that has been instrumental to the release of the so-called EU taxonomy on sustainable finance, which is basically, let's call it a list of let's say technologies, types of projects that could deserve the label of sustainable finance, and thus could serve as an instrument in de-risking investments in climate neutral cities. So it's got a position that taxonomy and the role that taxonomy might have in helping these cities attracting the right finance to become climate neutral and to become smart. Then we have Peter Radford, who's also with us. And Peter represents the Amber Infrastructure Group. And Amber Infrastructure is actually an investor that's also part of the investor network of the Smart Cities Marketplace. He is an investment director, and hopefully he will be sharing with us what, as seen from a private investor perspective, what is important to them, to that group, in helping cities to achieve their mission. What is basically the roadmap of these types of private investors on their journey to become more of a sustainable finance provider? Then we are going to close off with two presentations from cities, actually two Nordic cities. Well, I thought that would be fitting, given the fact that we are presenting to a Nordic Edge Expo audience. We have Lisa Ennarsson from the city of Stockholm. She is a project manager within the Department of Environment and Health Administration. So she's very sort of, she carries a warm heart towards the good cause of climate neutrality, and she's going to give the city perspective on what does it actually mean to become a climate neutral city, and what could the role of public-private cooperation be, or should it be rather, in becoming climate neutral. And then finally, we have Elina Vanne. She's with the city of Espoo in Finland, and she's working within the sustainable development topic, and she's also very well versed with smart city projects in Europe. And she's going to share her perspective in Finland from the city of Espoo as well. She's working within the sustainable development. I am the moderator. She's also very well versed with people on time. Smart city. We don't want to spend too much time on presentation. And she's going to share. We really want to focus on discussion amongst the panelists. Also clearly to hear from you as an audience, which you might find interesting. Well, maybe you have questions, just pose them to us, and we will try to address them in this session. Now, this session will be recorded, so be aware of that, and hopefully we have enough time to cover all of your questions. Now, we have set aside 2 hours for this meeting. That isn't to say that that is an objective in itself to reach the 2 hours, but hopefully we have enough material for you and with you to spend valuable time together. Now, with that being said, I want to hand over to Jens Bartolmes, who's with us, and he's going to explain, as said, a little bit about the positioning of the marketplace, the smart city marketplace, in the wider EC context. So, Jens, I'm going to share the screen with your presentation. Hopefully I'll do that correctly. Let's see, this is, yeah. And I'm going to go to your presentation.
That's Stockholm.
It's here. And then I need to move this. Right, so hopefully you see the presentation, yeah?
Yes, so we can.
Okay, over to you, Jens, yeah.
Yeah, directly switch to the next one now. You introduced me nice, thank you very much, Elko. So what I can give you is obviously just a teaser of many things that we are doing around cities from the Commission side. So don't expect any in-depth voyage there, but just to put it in the global picture. So we have obviously some very big policy initiatives ongoing, like the Green Deal, that by now everybody should have heard of, and that is simply bringing Europe into the future and responding to many challenges that we have right now, including COVID, even though that was not really the starting point for the Green Deal, but now obviously it's on all of our minds. In the meantime, we have also from our framework projects for R&I, we have recognized the Green Deal, which obviously came after this work programs had been done, and we succeeded to secure another €1 billion to support the Green Deal through a Green Deal call and put the needed R&I to make the next big steps on many of the key topics, be that offshore, be that, for instance, electrolyzers for hydrogen electrolyzers. So some key technologies, but in the midst of it, almost 1/3 goes into research and innovation that is situated in cities. So cities is an essential point of this policy debate. Then we have the R&I dimension, which has been covered until now by Horizon 2020 and will now be taken over by Horizon Europe. And Horizon Europe, and you will hear more from Emmanuel later on, is featuring a very important new aspect. And these are the missions, 5 missions, one of them being mission on climate neutral and smart cities. As I said, just also this is it's a big part of this picture because it's again a move in the right direction to bring all the stuff that is happening on cities, and it's a lot, and I will just take a small part of it under one umbrella and work together in one direction and speak the same language. We have big investment programs like InvestEU, there's the Next Generation EU, there's Recovery Fund, so money is there and it's a lot, but it has been to be used wisely and in a coordinated way so that cities can best benefit from it. Next slide, please. So these are just some examples of what the Commission is doing together with different types of stakeholder groups to support smart cities, roll out smart cities in communities, first of all, not just the cities. So in the middle line, you see Horizon Europe and Horizon 2020. These are our framework programs through which we support through massive amounts of money the research and innovation part. This is done directly through calls, and there we actually fund cities that are part of the consortia directly through grants. Then we have the integrated set plan, the strategic energy technology plan that you see on the left top. This is our direct link on the R&I side with the member states, where we actually streamline the R&I that is ongoing through the whole European Union, and we work strongly with them together. And they also have one of their main topics being positive energy districts. They have an even more ambitious goal of getting up to 100 districts already by 2025, but we are talking about lower technology readiness levels, so that is enabling the rollout. Then on our right, we have the nice emblem for the European Innovation Partnership on Smart Cities and Communities, soon to be Smart Cities Marketplace. Renamed. This includes also a big database on all the knowledge that has been gathered from all the projects over the last decade. So the Smart Cities Information System, this goes together. Then we have on the left down, we have the Covenant of Mayors, which by now is almost 10,000 towns and cities coming together and grouping hundreds of millions of European citizens under this initiative. And this is the direct link to local administration, local policy, to what we want to achieve in our climate and energy goals. And then very, very new on the right left, you see scale. This is actually a support that will help all the Horizon 2020 and later on also Horizon Europe projects and all the money that flows into it, and these are hundreds of millions, to be actually helping the scale up also of the solutions. So not just having great pilot projects, but really making this a long-lasting process of city transformation in line with the needed energy and climate transition. Next slide, please. Elko, next slide, please.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
So if we are now talking about the link, the direct link between the European Innovation Partnership and its marketplace and the missions, then obviously this Lighthouse project cluster is very prominent in this discussion. So what did we do? Over the last 7 years, we had 7 separate calls each year on the Horizon 2020 Lighthouse projects. So this resulted in by now 17 Lighthouse projects running. One is about to start soon. More than 120 cities fully involved in this, almost €500 million invested in very big demonstration projects of 5 years project time, but actually the cluster now organizes itself to be also beyond that. So it's not just a project, but it's a meta project, and you can see it spans the whole of Europe by now. It's a very active cluster. They have actually, please, next slide. They have been working on many aspects, but apart from actually activating this more than 100 cities to really work together, they also have elaborated more than 550 thoroughly tested solutions in their cities, and they are developing packaged solutions, so kind of blueprints, where what is replicable or what is useful for other cities has been well distilled or is still being distilled, so that all the wealth of knowledge that has been generated can be also reused. The whole thing has a long-term vision, and so this scale cluster support that I showed on one of the previous slides, they are now working on making this cluster also more linked to the mission, for instance, more linked to the marketplace. We're working now very strongly together, and this will actually help in the long run also to make the mission that we will hear more about later happen. Because currently these are actually projects that are lighthouses also for the mission, because they show in an integrated way how you can transform a city into a more energy efficient, more livable, more with better mobility, and so many more things. So this is already a contribution from the past to the future and ongoing to the mission. Next slide, please. And then there's obviously the marketplace that we are talking about, and what one of the main aspects is they are actually, this has been developed over the last decade and has grown and grown, and we've learned a lot. And so we're now in a phase actually where we bring together cities, investors, technical solutions from these projects, for instance, and we guide the stakeholders through 3 phases. First, showing them what's there, then making them see and together with them developing what is possible in projects and investment initiatives, and then actually in the end come to a deal phase where this is then put into practice. We just had our General Assembly, and the amounts of money that were discussed for the deal phase in the end were close to 140 million. So we're talking really serious money being moved here, and that is a very good, it's a real success, because now it's from just gathering solutions, it's putting them into practice and bringing them together with the finance to make them actually happen. And if you want to have a closer look, you can go to the link on the slide bottom. Next slide, please. And so, as I said, this is just a teaser of the things we have. So we are now working with the member states on the final draft of the Horizon Europe R&I work program, which features a big chunk on cities. There will be, it will cover many aspects, and there should be a substantial amount of funding going into this, but there will be also a clear link that this work program works together with the existing initiatives and with the upcoming, like the mission. So this work program will be an integral part of making the missions actually reality. There are other partnerships that will also help the same thing, like the new one that is driving the urban transition partnership. It's co-funded also under Horizon Europe. There is, as I said, the Strategic Energy Technology Plan. They are working very effectively on actually giving a classification to positive energy districts and ambition levels. That is very important work to actually make different pilot projects also to be confronted between each other. Then we have the ARANET that is ongoing on positive energy blocks. We have from other sides, more from the industrial part, the one in intelligent city challenges. We have from the IT part, the living in EU. We have the global covenant of mayors, which goes beyond, which is also getting bigger and bigger. We have mobility initiatives like the Civitas, which is almost as same age kind of like the EIP. So there's so many things out on cities, and the missions and the marketplace will actually be the glue in this whole thing, bringing them all together and making them work for the cities and with the cities. With this, I come to close. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jens. It's good to have a guide in the land of the EC smart cities. Should I say universe? Because it's not so simple even for me to understand everything. So thank you for that, for providing this map of the territory, and I think it's quite useful for our audience to understand sort of the lay of the land in city land and how that all combines in the various sort of arms and strands of the European programming and policies. So indeed, as I announced, is that the next presentation will be from Emmanuel Forest, who is actually a member of the mission board on cities, and he's going to explain to us, a little bit around the background of that mission, as introduced by Jens, and what the sort of recommendations might be from the mission board towards achieving 100 climate neutral cities. As well, and hopefully he can also pinpoint some of the aspects that relate to investment, and especially around private investment. How can we crowd in private investment to really drive that mission? So I'm now going to search for his presentation on my screen, which is I should be here. I've already found it, and then I'm going to put it in presentation mode. I'm going to switch display settings, and now you should be seeing. The slide set of Emmanuel. Emmanuel, are you there?
Yes. So, good afternoon, everybody. I have the pleasure to present the report, which has been handed over to the Commission yesterday. And so I will comment not all the reports, but the main issues and regarding specifically financing, but just next slide. A summary of what our proposal is, and I will read the page one extract of the report. The aim of the mission is our proposal to the European Commission to support, promote and showcase 100 European cities in their systemic transformation towards climate neutrality by 2030, and make these cities into experimentation and innovation hubs for all cities, thus leading on the European Green Deal and on Europe's efforts to become climate neutral by 2050. And so I would say, to summarize, that the mission that we propose, it's the proof of concept of the European Green Deal and the capacity of the European continent to be climate neutral in 2050. So a very important tool proposed in this report is the Climate City Contract, to have a co-creation of the project at the level of each city, and we'll insist on the fact that it's fully in line with Green Deal political priorities and EU recovery fund. But anyway, I would insist on the fact that in our mind, and it was confirmed by the Commission, this mission goes beyond research and innovation, beyond Horizon Europe, which will be a part of the mission. But of course, to make one of our European cities climate neutral, it's much more than just to finance research and innovation in the usual meaning. So next slide. Why I say that? It's because we have tried to make an evaluation of what it will cost. It was an important topic, and so you have two ways. I had a very entrepreneurial way, which was to assess according to various ratios, and at the end it costs roughly 10,000 euro per citizen, and I think this costing is relevant also for the whole European continent, including all aspects of costs. But anyway, we hired a consultant, Material Economics, which calculated that it would cost 96 billion euros for 100 cities, having each in average 100,000 citizens. So we are not far from the 10,000 euro per citizen. It's interesting to analyze the calculation of material economics, because we have 20, it's from left to the right, 24 billion euros for transport for green transportation, then 52 billion euros for energy efficient building, so climate neutral building, and it's not a surprise for us being in the construction business. 9 billion euros for heat generation, and 11 billion euros for electricity generation. So we have the total of 96, and they have calculated that over 40 years, I think, from now to 2060, the overall savings, benefits, including qualitative benefits like fresh air, better health, and so on, would amount to 121 billion. So you have a net positive case of 26 billion euro. But this business model with a positive net economic case is fine, but we have to find the upfront investments of 96 billion. And precisely, next slide, our conclusion is that the private actors will play a major role. And I am not representative of Bouygues, it's Bouygues Group. I am representative of the mission, and as a member of the mission, I act as independent expert. But as Bouygues, I can say that major actors will be determined to finance or to find the way of co-financing such a project, because it's for us a main strategic ambition, and it's evident that it's a duty for everybody. So secondly, a strong effort should be done to find innovative business models. I have just an example. They didn't want to be quoted, but it's the city of Ghent to finance building or houses deep retrofitting. We all know that the 10,000 euro per citizen is too much. Many citizens. We are not so wealthy to finance it. So, of course, there will be savings, but we have to find the right tool. And they designed something very interesting, is to finance this investment and not to require from the owners or the inhabitants, of course, to pay back immediately. The investment would be paid back in special occasions when the house is sold, for example. And so there is a benefit for the citizens without the financial burden. So it has to be checked, but it could be one possibility. And the remaining funding gap should be filled through public funding to secure a highest climate standard, of course. Next slide. That's why we we proposed to create a lending and blending facility for climate cities. Climate cities which will sign a climate city contract with all the stakeholders at the EU level, at the state level, or if it's a federal state, at the local level. And having this climate city contract, it will be easier to access to funding, and to make funding easier. The proposal is to create this lending and blending facility to have joint financing, blending grants and subsidies, and private and public lending. Additionally, a mission label will be given to these cities, and they will have preferential access to all financial instruments, and of course training and support. I have seen on one slide before the first presentation of Jens the network of the lighthouse cities. So we insisted within the mission board that we shouldn't forget the eastern ex-eastern country, the new member states. And my colleagues from these new member states insisted on the fact that cities there have not always all the capacities to access to funding, and they will need assistance, what will be part of the mission. Additionally, I have a contribution, next slide, on on the MFF Green Deal. So I am very cautious with this slide. We say that up to 10% of the 320 billion financial resource available under MFF Green Deal could support the objectives of the city missions. The calculation of the Commission, so the MFF has not been approved yet, but was that 40% of the MFF should be dedicated to the Green Deal. It makes an amount of 320 billion. Of course, it's an addition, as it's shown in the graphs, of all the specific amounts of each program: European Regional Development Fund, Horizon Europe, Cohesion Fund, Common Agricultural Policy, but with some specific ratios, we end to the 320 billion. So that doesn't mean that 10% in each program should be dedicated to cities. We just say that our mission will be successful, that logically, as cities represent 70% of carbon emissions, big amount of the Green Deal should be dedicated to city. It will be more the result than an administrative decision regarding all these sources of funding. And finally, to next slide, to make it work, we feel that we need to create a one-stop shop platform for the cities of the mission. And the best way would to have in each country a decentralized negotiation platform run by the EIB offices in the member states. You know that EIB is supposed to become a green bank, will play a major role regarding all these fundings for the Green Deal. And so cities could find at the local level the right persons responsible for putting in place the financing through the lending and blending facilities, and including, of course, private sector financing. My experience is that when the EIB is involved, when there is such an effort from public authorities in Europe with a huge amount of financing, then it's easy to blend and to obtain, as a major part of this financing, private financing under various schemes, including PPP, to make the thing work. So we are quite optimistic. I hope I was clear in my presentation. I thank you for your attention. I am ready to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emmanuel. So what I'm taking from this, it's really a mission. It's of a certain magnitude and also holisticness, if you like. It's very interesting to hear and also be sort of amazed by the figures and the size of the beast that we're trying to attack here. But indeed, 100 climate neutral cities by 2030 is no mean feat here. So we're talking about serious impact as well. And I think also listening, where's the biggest funding gap as through the analysis of the material economist, I could see it was in sort of renovation of buildings. I can't remember the exact figure, 50, 54. And I think that's actually quite a nice bridge. I actually said that Steve, I didn't ask him for his speciality in energy efficiency, but maybe it even comes back. And he probably will insert some remarks around that funding gap, around the existing building stock in Europe, and the relation with energy efficiency, because I think there's a lot to be gained there as well. So I will now switch over to thank you, Emmanuel, for that insightful presentation. And I will now switch over to Steve's presentation, which I should have here. Put it in presentation mode. Change display settings. It should be okay now. So Steve, if you can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Even bridge from Emmanuel's views around why, if you want to have climate neutral cities by 2030, how could a sustainable finance taxonomy contribute to that? And given the fact that you're an energy efficiency expert, so maybe within that space also address that. Okay, how are we going to get to this 54 billion that we require to get to 100 cities that have a very nice energy efficient building stock as well?
Sure, thank you. Okay, yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. As you said, my work on the advising the TEG and the taxonomy was really through the Energy Efficiency Financial Institutions Group, EFIG, and therefore it was very much focused on energy efficiency, both the retrofit problem, which is, as you just said, is the biggest problem that we face really, and the biggest need for investment, but also on new build. But I don't have too much to say about energy efficiency, as you specifically asked me not to. I wanted to give everybody an update really on the taxonomy, an explanation about the taxonomy, and make some remarks about how it affects cities, developers, vendors, and financiers looking at smart city projects. And when I say smart cities like you do, I include climate neutral and all the other aspects that we're trying to achieve. So first slide, please. Okay. So I've used this characterization of European Union's sustainable finance movement has been incredibly quick. It has been a speeding train, really. I think only in the last 4 years, 3 to 4 years, so much has happened. And unless you're plugged into this finance world, it's easy to miss it, and it's easy to underestimate the effects that it will have. So I think it is very important that particularly people who come from a non-financial background and a technical background do understand it and get up to speed. So hopefully I can provide at least an introduction to it. So the kind of quick sequence of events, really, the Commission's action plan for sustainable finance was launched, and after that, the high-level expert group was called, HLEG, as it was called, was created. And that was a panel of 20 experts from a range of disciplines. And their mandate was really to advise the Commission on how to steer the flow of public and private capital more towards sustainable development and sustainable investments. Also, to identify the steps that financial institutions, and importantly the supervisors or regulators of financial institutions, should take to protect the financial system from the systemic risks which are related to the environment. So environmental issues present risks to the financial systems. And then finally, the third piece of their mandate was to advise on how to deploy these policies on a pan-European scale. So the HLEG report proposed several things, but the most important one, and the one we're going to talk about today really, was this classification system or taxonomy. And I think 3 or 4 years ago, taxonomy was not a word that was used very much, certainly not in finance. It's more a sort of biological, scientific word perhaps, but we've become very used to it in the last few years. And as well as the taxonomy, the HLEG group did make recommendations for improving disclosure and also for incorporating sustainability into the mandates of European supervisors, say supervisors of the financial system, specifically to address the issue of risk. And then in 2018, the TEG, the Technical Expert Group, was set up to actually design this taxonomy. And the TEG consulted very widely with more than 200 people and different groups on creating technical screening criteria for climate change and adaptation activities. And the final report was issued in March 2020. And then in December 2019, the Council and the Parliament reached agreement on this regulation. And in June this year, the regulation was published and it came into force on 12th of July 2020. So this has been a really quick process, and as I said, a very significant process for the financial sector and hence for everybody, and particularly for people looking to implement sustainable projects. And the real impact will start in 2021 and 2022, and financial institutions are planning for that now. So next slide. So what is the taxonomy? It's important to understand what it is and what it is not. The taxonomy is a tool to help investors understand whether an economic activity is environmentally sustainable or not, and to navigate the transition to a low-carbon economy. It's really about creating this common language between investors, issuers, project promoters and policymakers. And common language is really important. I talk about this a lot in energy efficiency. We have a situation where energy efficiency experts speak their language, financial people speak their language, and very rarely do they come together. So it's important that this is about creating a common language. And we all need to start speaking this language much more than we have done in the past. I think it's also important to understand what it is not. It's not a list of technologies. It's a list of outcomes. It's really designed to overcome this uncertainty about what we really mean when we say something is sustainable. So, next slide. What are the implications? Well, there are a number of really quite significant implications for financial institutions and large companies, which we've had focused a lot on financial institutions, but not much on the companies. The first one is reporting. Financial institutions will need to report the extent to which their financial product aligns with the taxonomy. What does this mean? It means if an investment house, a fund, a pension fund is issuing a product, they will need to report the degree to which it meets and aligns with the taxonomy. And on top of that will be disclosure. So disclosure for companies of how much of their turnover, how much of their capital or their operational expenditure actually aligns with these taxonomy activities. And this is really quite significant. It means companies will have to put this into their annual report. It also means financial products of all types will need to report on how much they align with the taxonomy, and the users or customers of reports going right down from big institutions to individuals will be able to see how well these products align. And then there'll be a number of labeling and standard initiatives, including a green bond standard, so that these financial products can have these labels and people can be more confident that what's behind them. So those are the implications for financial institutions and large companies, and people are working on those now, developing the systems to report on it European-wide. It's also starting to impact investors and companies outside Europe, because obviously there's a lot of global investors. So that's for institutions and companies. If you go to the next slide. What are the implications for cities, developers, and project sponsors? Anybody designing a project, going through this idea of developing a concept, developing it, and then pulling the project together. We're getting somebody speaking. So the implications for people developing projects, cities coming up with concepts for projects, vendors, and so on. I think the most important one is project design. It's really important to conceive and develop and design projects that really do align with this taxonomy. It's also important to build into these projects transparency and reporting that feeds straight into the transparency and reporting that investors will have to make. And if you do that, there will be a lot of capital looking for projects that align with the taxonomy. Investors will be looking to deploy capital in this way. And if you don't do this, then there'll be a lot less capital available. Doesn't mean there will be no capital available, but there'll be a lot less capital. Capital flows will shift much more towards projects, programs, and products that are in line with the taxonomy. Next slide. It's also important to realize, although the initial work on the taxonomy has been about climate change, this whole sustainable finance train is going to start picking up these other issues, including everything from habitats, water resource, waste minimization, right through to access. So all of the areas that are important in the broader span of sustainability and in the Sustainable Development Goals. So we will see this approach rolled out much more. Again, it's important to be aware of that when you're designing and developing projects that need investing. Next slide. So I just want to touch on impact investing, which is related to the taxonomy in a way. The global impact investment market is growing. It reached 715 billion. It was the year before only 500 and so billion. So it's got really significant growth, and I expect, and most analysts expect, that to continue to grow. And impact measurement, how we measure impact in not only in environmental issues, but social issues like inclusion, diversity, all of those things, how we measure those are increasingly becoming standardized and increasingly being taken into account by a growing number of impact investors. Interesting enough, for those of us who are into energy, the top sectors for allocation in impact investors included energy, so that is positive. But there really is a close link here between impact investing and the taxonomy. And impact investing isn't about philanthropy, it's about investing, but having a designed impact in a number of different areas and then measuring that impact. So next slide. And final slide. So really, if I have one message, it's really about understand the taxonomy, understand what's in it, and develop your projects and your programs through the lens of taxonomy and also through the lens of impact investing. Because the kinds of projects that you're talking about, smart cities, climate change, are all about impact. But very often technical specialists focus on the technology. Even energy specialists just tend to focus on energy. But these projects have much wider impacts: air pollution, air quality, diversity, social inclusion, all of those things. We need to design and develop projects through that lens of impact and use the taxonomy and make them fit the taxonomy. And if you do that, there will be money to invest, and lots of money. So that's my message for the day. Thank you very much.
That was excellent, Steve. Thank you so much. And also quite a natural bridge also to our next presenter, who is Pete Radford of Amber Infrastructure, because in preparation we were discussing, okay, what does it actually mean for an investor to have, you know, sustainability high up in even in its vision and mission for the world, and you know, so the ESG element of investment, and he's going to speak around that. So from a fund like the Amber Infrastructure fund, what does this taxonomy, or other examples of having this lingua franca of, you know, SDG compliant, sustainable impact finance. And I think if you then start to hear from the cities after that, I'm hoping to hear, so if they design projects together with their collaborators in the city and region, how they are looking at sort of creating a sort of a holistic project design, so including all of the elements that you were alluding to as well, Steve. So it's not just about energy, it's about impact across a wider array of let's call it indicators. Yeah. So thanks again. So now I'm going to switch over to Pete's presentation, which should be here. Put it in presentation mode. Again, change display settings, and I should be okay for Pete. Yeah.
Great, thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to talk today. I'm briefly going to try and go through why the private sector is keen to invest in this sector, and how the private sector and public sector can come together to deliver the outcomes that we're all aiming for. Very briefly, I work for a company called Amber Infrastructure. We are a fund manager and investor in the infrastructure space in the UK, Europe, Australia and North America. And in particular, we look after 3 funds which have used cohesion funds from the previous EU programme periods, which have blended public sector finance with private sector finance in a number of areas within the UK, including London, which I'll briefly touch on. I thought Steve's presentation was fantastic, actually, and I'll cover this on one of my later slides, is how the private sector investors are trying to get ahead of the curve in trying to address the ESG requirements, because there is no doubt that will bring in an awful lot of private sector finance into this space. And it was also good to hear from the other investors how much public sector financing is going to go into this sector over the coming years. But I do think it is important that the public sector does have to work with the private sector to deliver the outcomes in the best and the smartest ways. If we could go to slide 3, maybe, that would be great. You can jump over that one. That's great, thank you. So why would a city want to consider doing a smart city partnership with the private sector? I think the first thing is and as being demonstrated by the amount of public sector money that's going to head towards this sector in the coming years, the private sector can't do this on its own. There is currently market failure in certain areas, and the public sector is the best place in many ways to help bring that market to a private sector investable position in the coming years. It's important that when doing that, we create additionality. So we go beyond the minimum standards and we really deliver the outcomes that will really get us to carbon zero or carbon neutral as quickly as possible. One of the good things about bringing in the private sector to work with the public sector is often you'll get the innovation that comes with the private sector. And I think that's quite key in demonstrating both at a technology level, but also from a financing level, in making sure that the public sector money goes further, delivers the outcomes, and delivers against its policy objectives. In terms of local engagement, one of the key things we find when we are doing public-private partnership is working with the key supply chains. So it's not just about the financing, you've got to bring the procurement, you've got to bring the technical aspects of all the deal together to make sure that the partnership is a long-term success. If we could go to the next slide, please, that'd be great. So I thought this slide was just briefly to say what to think about if you are considering a public-private partnership from a smart city perspective. And these are ones where we've seen, challenges arise if they're not dealt with early on in the thought process. So first of all, what's the public sector and the private sector's risk appetite? Private sector investment houses will have different risk appetite. Are you looking for an infrastructure fund such as ourselves that will want long dated steady cash flows? Or are you looking for more of a venture capitalist who will probably be more prepared to invest in the supply chain directly? And it's important that that's sort of outlined early on in the thinking of these partnerships. The governance process is equally important. Is it a hands-off governance process from the public sector, or is it hands-on? And my general feeling is, from those that we've dealt with, it's a mixture of the two. You want to have the public and the private sector both fully aligned, fully engaged, and not one side having too much control than the other. The procurement process, well, this is where things can go wrong before they've even started, and this is exceptionally important that your procurement is as flexible as it can, because this sector is innovating so quickly. So if you're putting in a long-term public-private partnership, make sure that the procurement allows that to grow over the years as we move into different technologies, different sectors and different ways of financing these projects. That leads on to the business case. What does the public sector want from the partnership? Is it a financial return, or is it more the outcomes being carbon, NOx savings, job creation? And you've got to give a bit of take on both. So you're not likely to get the financial return as well as all those other returns. And there's got to be a bit of an agreement, but you should also set that at the outset of exactly what is the risk appetite and the business case that the public sector is looking for. Then on the sustainability credentials, this is probably building a bit on the point what Steve just covered, and it's so important at the moment. But in effect, if investors are starting to put in place versions of the EU taxonomy or similar, and we've just launched Amber Horizons, which means that every deal that we look at has to look at all of the elements of the ESG aspects of it before we can even get any form of investment approval. And that's because our investors want to see that we're investing in line with the EU taxonomy and similar programs. And in return for that, you will get a lower cost of finance, which will be important to make the projects happen. If we could go on to the next slide, that'd be great. So I just wanted to briefly touch on a fund that we do manage on behalf of the Greater London Authority, and this is a £500 million fund which was seeded with European Regional Development Fund money and launched in 2018. And the GLA ran a procurement process and said, can we bring a private sector investor who would both bring with them the money, which is obviously key, but also the expertise to deliver the technical and procurement side of projects in order for the European money and the private sector money to be blended together, a bit like the blending facility I think that was mentioned earlier on in the residential perspective, in order for us to tackle areas where there has been market failure to date. So a good example would be on an energy efficiency project. Let's say it takes 15 years for the energy savings to come up because you want to do a deep retrofit. The private sector would probably struggle to get to 15 years, 15, 20 years on its own in terms of financing something. So that's where the public sector element comes in. It can take that bit longer dated returns than what the private sector would have, but it allows the project to go further in terms of what it's achieving from an energy and carbon perspective. I'm pleased to say that MEIF has been pretty successful to date. Inside the first 2 years of this programme period, so from 18 to 20, we've already invested 93% of the ERDF and mobilised about £200 million of private sector capital into it. And if I've got time, could I just quickly talk about one actual project to put this into perspective?
Yeah. So, which one do you want to pick?
Number 8, slide 8. Would be the Zenobi deal, I think. Keep going a bit. That's the one. So I just wanted to sort of put, actually, what does this mean when the private sector and public sector is coming together? And one of the recent deals that we've done is a charging infrastructure deal, where we have funded the charging infrastructure for the upgrade of two bus routes in London that are going to electric. And what this deal shows is it actually combines so many technologies together, which is going to become important as we go towards smart cities. So we had the charging infrastructure, we had some battery storage to both improve the revenue lines, but also to prevent us having to get a large grid connection. We've got the buses themselves that are electric, and then indeed on top of that we fit the solar is going across the depot to provide a PPA to the depot owner. So we're actually providing the renewable energy into the depot. And finally, it's all being metered on a half-hourly basis, so everyone knows exactly what is and what isn't happening. And that smart metering data collection is going to be key, because it'll allow us to then fine-tune future projects as and when we see things potentially not working quite as we expected in the technical case. So I think that's the sort of project that I'd be great to see across the EU in coming years, I think, because it's a mix of technologies together to make the business case stack up for the private sector. That's about all I had to say, if that's okay. And thanks again for the opportunity to discuss this today.
Thank you, Pete. I think this was actually excellent, following Steve's presentation, which gave a broader perspective on, let's say, sustainable finance and the movement in Europe around sustainable finance. And it's great to see that, one example of a serious fund like yours is also it coalesces around the same thinking as well. And maybe the mission that was presented by Emmanuel is maybe even feasible if you start to think about all the private sector finance coalescing around this sustainable finance movement, which I think should be part of that mission that was presented by Emmanuel. So great, thank you very much. Now, I should have said ladies first, but it's actually now ladies last. But we have two ladies, waiting eagerly to present their views, but then from a city's perspective, and hopefully they're able to sort of take on board the thinking that was presented both by the from the mission board, as well as the private finance perspectives, as presented through Steve's contribution and yourselves, Pete. So I'm now going to hand over to I think it's Is it Lisa? I think.
Yeah, I think I was.
Lisa, where are you? Is it Espoo is here, and then I need to find Stockholm is here.
Yeah.
Okay, display settings, duplicate slides. No, sorry. Yeah. Okay, now, right?
Yep.
I still need to move you. Well.
Further up, I think.
Move you here. Move you there. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So thank you. Yeah, I'm Lisa Enarsson from the city of Stockholm. And we want to be an international role model in the global environment and climate work. You can move to next. So we're working towards, we want to sign a climate city contract, and we have a goal of being fossil fuel free and climate positive Stockholm by 2040. And now we've taken the first step from this year with a new environmental program. It's the 10th in the row, and also a new climate action plan, which is the 7th that we have done in Stockholm. You can take the next slide.
There you go, sorry, yeah.
And as you can see here, we have been working quite long, since 1990. The CO2 emissions has already been reduced quite much. And in the same time, we have been having a growing population, and also our gross regional product has been growing. So this is it's a good business to work with the CO2 reductions. You can take next. So this is a little bit about our environmental program. The goals, we have 7 goals. For instance, we want to be the fossil fuel free and climate positive Stockholm by 2040, but also we want to be a fossil free organization already 2030, and that Stockholm should be adapted to the future climate. And you can see the others as well, but these are the 3 main pillars in the city climate contract, we think. But we need to think a little bit more about if there are areas that could be coming before 2040 as a climate positive area. You can continue to click there. You get so we have 16 goals and with the indicators, and you can take next again. And for these, we have action plans. So now we're really going to start working in this direction. Next slide. Yeah, as I said, so we have been working since 1990, and so far picking much of the low-hanging fruits. And now we really have a challenge to go down to 2040. You can take next slide. And in this climate action plan, we have also looked at our climate budget until 2040. You can take next, click one more time. And for 2023, this is where we're planning to reach. And next click. This is our total budget. So it's like 19 million ton we are going to take on the European, global climate budget. Next. But to reach the 2023 goal, we have already then assignments per committee on what they need to do. So we have the different parts of Stockholm are responsible for reaching the parts of this budget. Next picture. Well, and we are going to work with carbon sink techniques, but of course we want to work with mitigation that's more important. So you can take next one again. And historically, we can see that we have been working, but the white part, that's the transportation, hasn't changed very much. So we think that transportation for us, that is the main challenge we have. You can take next. So our goal is to try to get 20% biking commuters. And we actually already have 77% of public transportation when it's peak hours. So I think and we are planning to work with the biking lanes, but also to develop the metro lanes, so we'll have even more possibilities. But now I think the challenge is more what we're doing on our spare time. So the working travel is quite okay. But then when we're taking our kids for football games or whatever, going to our cottages and so on, that's where we have a challenge to work on the transportation in the future. You can take next. And Stockholm has also coordinated one of the Lighthouse projects, Grow Smarter, for the last 5 years. And here we have looked at new smart solutions, sustainable solutions, which now the challenge comes on how to scale up this. So this is an example from Cologne, where they have implemented 10 mobility stations within the project time, but they have already in their city plan a plan to implement 130 of these. So this is something that we really need to look into also in Stockholm to see where and how many mobility stations would we need in our city to be a complement to the transportation. We can take next. In Stockholm, we installed a delivery room in one of the buildings that we were retrofitting. And this is also a solution that we think is really something that we need to scale up when people are shopping more and more through the internet. So then in this way, there can be a bike delivery with a package to your house, so you don't need to go by car to go and pick up your package. You can take next one. And this is another example that we did in the Grow Smarter project, where we have installed optical sorting of waste. So there's only one inlet and the waste goes underground to one container where it's picked up, and you have the different colored bags for the different fractions. And this also saves a lot of CO2 emissions, as you can see, and needs to be scaled up to give more effect. Here we have a challenge because we don't have an optical sorting station in Stockholm. This is in a neighbor municipality. So that is the transportation to next door is not a good idea. So we need to work on that. We can take next one. But of course, in the Grow Smarter project, we were also the focus was actually on retrofitting, and here we have retrofitted one of the buildings and actually reached 76% heating energy saving by both passive measures but also smart solutions within the heating system. So we keep all the heat within the building. And in addition, we were also working with district heating, where we picked up all the excess heat from a data center and supermarket and into the district heating, so it can instead warm up apartments instead of just going up in the air. So next picture. So what we want to say with this is that we think that we still need to continue to work with pilot projects, but we need to be much better on using all these results that we get from these projects. In Grow Smarter, we had follower cities that were learning from us, but we didn't really have a plan for the upscaling within our own city. So now we are actually in a project working on trying to fill that gap. What kind of process do we need in the city? And I think we need a transition in how we're working in the process and the routines on picking up the smart solutions from pilots and making them standard within the city and mainstream them. That's what we need to do to be able to reach a climate positive city by 2040 and the parts of the city by 2030. You can see this is one of our last reports. So if you follow that link, you can reach all our recommendations. You can take next slide. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to share with you. And we are looking forward on hoping to be one of the 100 cities signing on the city climate contract.
Thank you, Lisa. That was an excellent group of examples from a city with a high ambition. So again, a city on a mission, in this case Stockholm. Probably I've seen some technology examples, which I'm sure are also part of the sustainable finance taxonomy. So probably eligible for private investment as well. And probably that might help you indeed in the scale-up ambition that you have within your own city as well. Some energy efficiency examples, some very good examples. I saw 76% savings. I saw on the slide. So that's really good. Now, thank you, Lisa. Over to our final presentation for this, and already on a different channel. Namely my phone, I can see questions even coming in from the audience. I suggest what we do as a panel is to first address those after this presentation so that we don't keep our audience waiting to get their answers as well. I will have to review the questions while the other presentation is going on. So I'm now going to hand over to Espo. So Elina, I'm going to put your slides on the screen.
Thank you.
So here you are. So the floor is yours, Elina.
Can you again put it on the presentation mode? Thank you.
Is it not in presentation mode?
No, it's on the presenter mode, so I can see the next slide as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now all good.
Yes. Okay.
So last but not least, I'm very happy to be here to tell about what we have done in our city on our way to become a smart city, City of Espoo. So my name is Elina Vanne and I work as Horizon 2020 Lighthouse Project Manager at the City of Espoo. And I also lead the consortium and the work at the Lighthouse City Espoo. We at Espoo have already received many recognitions about our work, but I don't think we are there yet. This is continuous work. And in this presentation, I will give you some ideas which aspects in Espoo has been acknowledged to be significant in this path toward smarter. And yes, can I have the next slide?
Of course you can.
So sometimes this work in sustainability or smart city, it's really about baby steps. And sometimes it feels like it's giant leaps together with our partners and with our residents and good times really. But I really have seen what's been most important, and it's really about the city to realize what are the strengths and what you want to become. In our city, our strategy, the Espoo story, has been the guiding instrument in our work. And of course, the sustainability and smart city work, it hasn't been done only in the recent years. It has been kind of being prepared for a longer time already. So of course, you need the support from the political side. You need the support from the people who work for the city. And of course, you need the support from the residents. you need to have pretty ambitious goals. I've noticed that without those, it's not really progressing anywhere. Nothing is happening. And another thing, that those goals must have ownership. For example, here at the City of Espoo, our sustainability work and the smart city work is owned by our Mr. Mayor. And when it's high level ownership, things do happen. And certainly, we are not doing this alone. The city itself couldn't do this work. We need partners, we need collaborators, we need the community to support this. But of course, we do need the money as well. And next slide. First, a bit about the characteristics about the city. One way to become smart, and in that case also it means sustainable, you can do that creating different kind of city structure that what's compared to what's usual. We have 5 city centers, which means that the services that the citizen needs are close by. And then also in our city, our citizens really value the wellness value of the nature, the green areas. And that's how we can keep it so that green areas are close to everyone living in Espoo. Another aspect could be, for example, companies. What kind of companies are located in the city? And what kind of goals they have? What do they want to develop? Is there something that they would like to develop with the city or somehow in collaboration? Let's go to the next slide. Really the model, how we do things here in Espoo, the Espoo way, it is with a community, with collaboration and co-creation. And in that sense, it means that the city actually is taking the role also as a platform, yes, a partner in the ecosystem, yes, but also as an orchestrator of the development work in a way. We have been really active on creating strategic partnerships, and we are lucky in the city to have universities and technical research center VTT, for example. With those, we can really develop the city further and create research projects, which I'm going to tell you a bit more about later here. And in our city, there is one characteristic that I'd like to still mention, is that half of our people, of our residents, adult-aged residents, have a university degree. So actually, the platform and the ecosystem where we are developing, we also have the residents who are part of it, and those residents are interested in new things, new technologies, and new ways to make their lives better, everyday life better. Next slide, please. And yes, earlier I've heard in the other presentations in this session, they have been mentioning the Lighthouse project. Yes, Espoo is proud to be a Lighthouse city, and Sparks began only a year ago, but it's really great to be part of this project and creating citizen-centric urban environment. My background is in engineering, and this is why I want to really emphasize the fact of citizen-centric, because we can always create technology and new things, but if we are not taking the citizens to that development work, they might not be interested in, they might not see the value in it. But when they are doing those with us, then it's really the potential is huge. And in Sparks, it is about creating positive energy districts. It is about developing e-mobility, and it is about also creating new ways of citizen engagement. Next slide, please. What I also see very important is how we communicate and how we really sometimes stop a bit and focus on what are we doing. And Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, I really believe that they provide new tool for all of us to communicate what we do and how we do. And with us, for the city, with our partners, with the companies, this framework has really provided to be very useful, because the companies tend to use this framework also to present their sustainability work. It was only this June when we published our voluntary local review, and it's really a story about how we do things together. It's a story about over 100 projects, how we have made Espoo more sustainable. There are stories from the city which have been done with the city, and also from our partner companies, how they have made the city better. And like I said earlier, we do need the money for the projects. And what our city has seen useful for the development work, we have used so far at least two types of European funding, the European Regional Development Fund, and then of course the Horizon 2020. And now we are of course looking forward to the fact of the Horizon Europe realizing probably soon, and what opportunities can open from there. And these kind of initiatives like the 100 carbon neutral cities in Europe, that's something that we are very much interested, because like I said, we do collaboration with the companies, with the residents, with the universities, research institutes, but we do want to collaborate also with other cities. In the beginning, I was supposed to say that not one city is similar to another. Now I'm saying it, I'm not forgetting it. And that is something that we must, of course, admit, but also to take it as a strength, because still there is always a lot to learn from each other, and to support that collaboration and fund it off also a bit. It might really create even more sustainable and smarter Europe. And last slide. No, we are not yet there, because I did write some, not the recipe, I don't have the recipe for the success, but some ingredients that we have noticed here in Espoo, what is significant when you do the smart city development. It's the city ambition level with concrete goals. It's really, when you're talking about a big city, the city organization is huge. You have to find out ways how the different departments can work together, are allowed to work together instead of silos. You have to be able to build platforms for collaboration and the development work. And like I said, ownership and ownership of the work, and also strategic partners are very significant. And then the funding thing, we do need the money also for the development work. And the co-creation, that's the word I like to use, because sometimes the development work is about doing a bit better something that's been done for years. But with co-creation, you can really figure out new ways, totally new ways of doing things together with your partners. And the people. I never forget to mention that. We need the people. We need the people who develop things, who work on things, but also those who use the new innovations in their everyday life. It's people. It's not about the technology. It's really people-centric things happening. And then communications. Cities, be open and tell about what you're doing, like Stockholm and Espoo here is in this session doing. And also assess what you're doing, compare with other cities. Also take part into different kind of competitions. That's one way to get assessed. And then do not stop doing the development work. It's continuous. It's not one project or two projects. Stockholm and it's hopefully in this session doing. And also assess what you're doing, compare with other cities. Also take part into I think the city is really, it's not about the technology and innovations. At the end, it is about creating value for our residents and the well-being. And of course, every city do have also global responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Elina. That was very good, especially the last slide. I think this is quite a nice and rounded set of panel introduction. First, we had Jens with the sort of the technicalities of the whole machinery of the EC. Then we had Emmanuel with the sort of the mission discussion. We had Steve and Pete talking about the financial let's say fintech, financial technology side of things. Then we had Stockholm looking at real impact in the city, and the final slide of this panel is actually a few children, and that's the residents. We're all doing it for the well-being of residents. So I think that's quite. I didn't actually. I saw the slide, but actually I think it's not good that this is the last slide of the panel discussion. So we shouldn't really forget that this is really about people and not about fintech and all of the structuring of deals. That's important, but those are tools to achieve something, right? So thanks for reminding all of us about that, Elina. So what I will do now is to stop sharing my screen, and I want to propose that we are going to have a look at the various questions. And I need to roll back in my chat window. Let's have a look. And I think there's the first question I see is a particular question for Steve here. You may have seen it as well. So do you have a best practice in mind when it comes to impact and taxonomy? Is there something you can, maybe also the others, or maybe a particular Pete, maybe not exactly the taxonomy, but the use of, let's say, an ESG type framework as well?
Sure, I'll try and answer that. I think it's true to say that people are still evolving different standards of how to measure impact in lots of different ways, because it's a relatively new idea. But there's a big convergence that's happening now and emergence of standards. And the one that I would personally use and have used is the impact measurement projects approach. It sets out a very clear framework. It's been signed up to by lots of different financial institutions around the world. And it just makes you sit and think about what are the impacts that we're trying to achieve? What are the risks associated with those? How do we actually measure them going forward? And what's our plan for measuring it? So there are frameworks that exist. I personally would do that. I think it's still too early to say there's just one standard, but there are standards that are emerging, and that's good. So
maybe Pete, can you comment on that as well? I see you smiling, particularly around the mark. There is now one standard, and Pete, also for the audience, I actually work for a company that's called DNVGL, and so standards is also a part of our sort of raison d'être in life. So yeah, so standards. So
yeah.
Pete?
No, I think Steve's spot on there. We are in a vastly evolving area of standards, and there are quite a few standards out there. I was hoping Steve might say Amber Horizons was the standard to go for, but where we are and what we have taken a mixture of different standards together. So we've got the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We also follow the UN Principles for Responsible Investment. And we follow a large part of the EU taxonomy. So it's an evolving area, and I expect there will be numerous different standards. But underlying all of that is, I think they're all, as Steve says, pretty much aligned with the direction of travel from an ESG perspective. So there's pick your standard, but the ultimate outcomes and goals are all all aligned, whichever standard you go for.
Thanks. And the other one want to comment on standards. So Elina introduced the SDG framework. That's in particular important for cities as well.
I think the only thing I'd add is going back to this concept of building this in right at the beginning. It's really important that you do have leadership that says, we're going to do this way. We're going to look at all these impacts, and we're going to have projects that are cross-cutting and have multiple impacts, and we are going to measure them. And that's what's needed. We're not just going to do a district heating project or an energy efficiency project. We're going to have a multiple impact cross-cutting project, and we're going to measure it. That's where the leadership comes in.
Yeah, and I think we heard from Elina that the mayor is particularly, is one of the key carriers of that, as a safeguard of the, let's say, the holisticness, is that a word, of the whole program. I think we also heard that from Lisa as well, that it's sort of, I can't remember, you call them committees or groups of people, so that sort of, yeah. Maybe you can comment on that, Lisa. So this ownership and the governance, and that it doesn't become like a set of small projects that are not bolted together under a common umbrella.
Yeah, well, I mentioned that we want to continue with pilot projects, but we want the solutions in the pilots to be standard in the whole city. But then I don't mean standard like ISO 2000 standard or something like that, but more that it's mainstreamed in the city. It doesn't need to be a specific standard, but that we in the city see this as something that is always there when we are planning for an area or so on. For the committee part, it's the committees, the administrations within the city that are responsible for different parts of this action plan for reducing the CO2 emissions.
Excellent. So there's a specific question for Pete. I can see in the chat. You've seen it as well. Is there a kind of guidance or a standard that cities can follow to cover or to address, or maybe the expectations of private investors?
So if that's coming from do I need a certain return from my project, then the answer to that is it does differ between different types of investors. No. So you can have a bank who will want a low return and low risk. You'll have some fund like myself that would want a medium return and medium risk, and then you have a private equity investor that wants a high return and a high risk. So from a risk and return perspective, it does depend on the investor. But what I would say is all investors in this sphere should want certain things to be happening at a city level to attract them in. And that's things like political engagement, demonstration of collaboration between the public and the private sector. Again, the ability to deliver against a certain standard from an ESG perspective, and also that there's ability to build up a supply chain and the people value locally as well. So they're sort of key things that I think a city should look to have to attract the private sector investor. But you'll get lots of, in terms of what a private sector investor actually needs from a risk return, will differ between types of investor.
Yeah, just a question. Maybe it's not a question from the audience, but I also want to draw in Emmanuel. So this concept of a smart city contract, in what way or what could it help? Let's say you guys, with is that a token of continuity? Is that does it build trust? Is it a contribution to your potential due diligence work? Is it something that gives reassurance, I think? And that's because Elina and Lisa also, they are on this journey of becoming a climate neutral city. Maybe not by 2030, by 2040, as you said, Lisa. So how could that help such a thing? Emmanuel, maybe you could.
It's a question to me, or?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I think so. The idea of the climate city contract is to insist on the fact that first of all, it's a co-creation between all the stakeholders and first of all of the citizen. As Elina said, it must be citizen-centric, and it's the main point. it must be citizen-centric. So, both presentations of Stockholm and Espoo demonstrated that it's, as you said, it's a very huge way to climate neutral city. There are many aspects to take into consideration. I think that Nordic countries, and specifically Stockholm and Espoo, are more advanced than other cities. But the idea is, as I said, to have at least 2-3 cities in each member states, even in the member states which are not so advanced. And the climate city contract is to say, for such a huge project, you must have around the table all the stakeholders, of course, the municipality, but also your local government for a federal state, or the national government for a non-federal state, the business representatives, and all that who can contribute to the success of the project, with the first phase, which will be declaration of interest, and then the design of the contracts, which will be a huge task, and then the selection of the city. But it helps because I would say it's like an MOU in a business. When you have a huge project, you must put in place a huge project financing scheme. You have, first of all, a memorandum, a term sheet, and or a MOU with several partners who contribute to the projects, to make sure that there is a goal, that the goal is achievable, that there is a business case, and that you have the partners. Even if, regarding the business sector, there will be tenders in the second step. But I think the idea of the climate city contracts is precise, is to have the document. It's a new name for document, which already do exist in some cases, but and then to make the financing easier, because especially for financial stakeholders, there is a clear goal and clear figures on clear investments, investment targets, and measures. So that's it.
Thank you, Emmanuel. So Peter, Stephen, as representatives of, let's say, the finance community, so would it help to have such a city contract?
Pete, you again?
Yeah. I mean, definitely. I think that's the minute that the city is demonstrating its its objectives of delivering, that will crowd in the private sector funding. So yes, that it's fun. It will be a huge attraction to the private sector investor.
Yeah, and I think that also plays to the point about scaling and scaling up. We've see far too many one-off pilot projects that never get scaled. We sort of know what most of the technological solutions are. Okay, there's some technologies that we need, but essentially we have solutions, we have mechanisms, we have contractors, we have designers who can design this stuff, but we're not very good at scaling it up. And having some kind of contract that says, okay, we are going to evolve these solutions and then scale them up is really important. A, because we need to scale them up. And B, if you're talking about investors and the financial institutions, then it's only when you scale them up that you get to numbers that are interesting. Because, there was a number mentioned by Jens at the beginning. He said 140 million of projects were discussed. Well, 140 million of projects is great for a start, but when you start dealing with financial institutions, 140 million just is not that much. I mean, Pete's fund has 500 million. Okay, he'd be very happy to deploy 140 million into one project, or a series of projects. But it's not that big amount of money, and people need to grasp that and say, okay, if you're talking about $1 billion or so in a city over a long period, then you can really get people interested and motivated to do stuff. And scaling is critical. You need to focus on scaling.
Thank you, Peter. Steve, and the smile from Pete is relevant there as well. Maybe related to this is, and it's also a question that comes up in my marketplace work a lot, is that this idea of bundling investments to get a certain size across a certain portfolio. That many of the projects are maybe a bit too small, even in a scale up scenario. could this sort of, suppose you would have a coalition of 100 cities, could that also help in finding, bundled investments as well? Any of the panelists want to comment on that, on this idea of bundling? Certainly if you have, smaller cities, with all respect, so like 100,000 inhabitants, 150,000. So, having a set of cities and then bundling investment across similar projects in those cities could potentially be interesting for investors like Pete as well.
I think that would be very helpful. I mean, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think in London there's an estimate of about 8 billion is needed to go into London to get it towards its 2050 zero carbon perspective. It probably a lot more than that, but that was a few years ago. But London may be big enough to have a fund, but then all the other cities in the member states and in the UK, they will need to work together to be able to track that finance in. So I think it is key that we think about how we work collaboratively, both public, private, but also, and I think it's been mentioned a couple of times, it's public and public as well, that they should also working together. And down the next level, we need to make sure that like our local municipalities are working with our health systems, are working with our education systems, so they all are working together, and that creates scale at a project level too.
Yeah, I think just to echo that again, in energy efficiency, we talk about bundling projects a lot because they're very tiny projects, but the same applies here. It's about having the framework and the methodologies and procurement frameworks that are similar enough so that, if a project goes through the system, you've got a range of investors who are lined up who will take it, so that you're not just doing, here's one, let's talk about this one forever and try and get it done. You go through a system and a conveyor belt, and that's bundling and standardization. All of those elements are important there.
Can I comment on the scaling up part? Because I think through our Grow Smarter project with the Lighthouse project, we were working together with companies to implement all these smart solutions. So we really have a good experience of having this collaboration together with them. And for instance, for the retrofitting building that I showed here, our housing company, they have looked into the business model here, and as you saw, we had a reduction of 76%. But when they look into it, they say for them maybe 50%, which is quite a lot as well. That would be okay for their own business model. So we really are in need, if we are going to go this far as we did in Grow Smarter, then we really need some other funding and investments to go there. And I think also one of the prerequisites which this Climate City contract would give us is that we have our politicians with us, that we have signed a document that we are going to test how to be climate neutral or even climate positive in at least certain areas for 2030, and that gives us much more muscles to work. And I think then it's really important to work with the inhabitants in that area and also the companies, the local companies in that area, because we need to be on the boat, all of us, to reach a climate positive city. It's the behavior not only for the people living there, but also the businesses working in the area.
Thank you, Lisa, for that addition as well, and that coloring in from a Stockholm perspective. I can see another question which is slightly different. It's around the impact of the pandemic on your journey, if you like. Let's phrase it that. Has the pandemic opened up any new opportunities for you, or has it only been challenges? That's the literal question. I'm not sure. It's actually addressed to Elina. I can see now. Yeah. Maybe Elina, you want to take? You're able to take that.
Yes, certainly. And first of all, thank you for the question. I think it's really significant because the cities are taking quite a strong push regarding the COVID. But at least here at Espoo, I have been very happy to see how resilient our city it actually is. This was a good test because, of course, being resilient is something that it's nowadays something that everybody uses. That I want to be that, my city wants to be that. But this was a real test for that, and for our city. For example, the decision-making processes, everything is now done online, and it's working, and we are very proud of that. And we are proud of our politicians as well, as they were flexible and able to switch to that mode so quickly when the pandemic kind of started. But yes, I know we have a lot of work to do, and there is a bill to pay, and yes, and we are not there yet regarding that. But anyway, the first impression is that challenges, yes, some, but still on the positive side, that we will go through this together.
Thank you, Elina. Maybe Lisa, you can sort of add to that from a Stockholm perspective.
Yeah, of course.
How is the pandemic affecting your climate neutrality program? Let's call it that.
Yeah, I think, of course, everybody is really learning now very quickly how to have meetings on a distance and so on. So that's something that we will continue with, which I think will maybe change how we are building our working places in the future. We will not need to have as much space as we do now, because people will be continuously working more from home, I think. But then I also have a colleague, he's working with energy advice to private house owners. And with the pandemic, it wasn't really recommended to meet each other and go around in the building to check different parts. So he has developed a tool for this advisory energy advice, where they have a tool where they fill in a lot of data about that building, and then the advice is done via camera. So the house owner goes around in the house and shows this is the energy system and so on. So they have a distance meeting. Even going around in the house. So this was really a quick development that was needed because of the pandemic. And I think that will come a lot of more kind of tools, digital tools that we will be using.
Yeah,
more efficient.
Thank you, Lisa. Just following on that. So maybe it's a bit of a sort of a frank question. Are investments happening? Is it continuing, Peter? Is deals being created, made, prepared?
I mean, the answer to that is yes. Actually, the Zenobi bus deal that I talked about actually was due to close it first week of March, which was just before we went into lockdown in the UK. But yeah, it threw up challenges to us to get it over the line, but we did do. And if anything, the political support is certainly within London, but also looking at how the Commission is responding to this shows that we've got to. Things are challenging, but we're putting in place the firepower to really deliver for the short to medium term. And yes, there may be some delays on certain projects, but the mechanisms that we're all talking about here today should ultimately result in hopefully things happening quicker than even they would have done as the Commission has reacted so quickly in terms of responding to it.
Yeah, so with having, good to see Jens, because I was about to ask Jens a question. Good to see Jens as well. So these instruments that we discussed are you call it firepower, are in place. So the fintech, like the taxonomy and other ESG type frameworks, will drive the private finance towards the sustainability goals that are so sought after by the cities. Whether they sign up to the mission, yes or no, but many cities have these sort of climate neutrality or zero carbon plans as well. So they shouldn't be deterred because there's enough firepower and there's enough, let's say, fintech in place and standards in place that could help unlock the private finance to match, or maybe I should say leverage the public finance that's being put in place as well. Maybe Jens, you can comment on the. I wanted to ask you around the scale up as well, because scale up is clearly also a very important policy goal for you as the Commission as well. To you invest, or you put money into projects, and you want to see the fruit being born not only in the project but across across the city in which the project took place, but also in the fellow cities that are let's call it listening into the innovation radio that's happening in the city as well. So could you comment on that? What do you like to see? What are you worried about? What are you confident about in terms of the scale up? Having heard the investors speak, learning about the taxonomy being in place as well, and learning about the sort of the reassuring governance arrangements, at least in the two cities that we heard of as well.
Yeah, scale up, and we called it at the beginning, we called it replication, but then the questions if replication is actually the right thing. So at the right, we are talking actually scaling up, meaning that first of all in the cities themselves that tried it. So also for Lisa now they finished their 5 years in the project, but we're happy to see that this actually launched also more thinking about these topics. While Stockholm was always at the forefront there, but so it's a continuous process, and that is for us already starting where the scale up has to be, because if it's just a project and it's ticked and then it's over, there won't be any scale up. If it's seen that it makes sense, the first scale up obviously will happen in the city. The scale up then can happen in other cities, and that is what we are hoping for our fellow cities, which are in the learning mode, but then obviously also in the cluster itself. That's why we now have put also in place a big support contract that will actually help to package the solution. So again, to make scale up, it means that every city is different. So we have to extract the parts that are actually easily scalable all over, not all over the place, but for instance, in the same region where it's easier. And then the next thing when it comes to finance, obviously, is to match what Lisa said, the 50% that are currently seen as a good business model with the 76 or higher percent, so that actually it's also mainstream finance world that going to very high levels of energy efficiency, of low energy use, of renewable local energies, that this is actually seen as a business model. This has changed a lot over the last decade, completely unfeasible to talk about something like this. Then the next thing also, what I really hope to see on the European market is more this kind of ESCO approach, which in other parts of the world actually works quite well, which here for some reason still is not as well accepted or well working. So because then also the financing is put on another level, and actually the people are not scared away from this so much, because in the best case, they don't even see anything happening with financing. They just see better services and not more cost or even less cost for them. So these are my reflections on that part.
Thanks, Jens, for that. So I already can see that we are in the last 5 minutes of our time together. So what I wanted to do was to give everybody less than a minute to, maybe the final message towards the audience, following this panel. So we're all on this mission towards climate neutrality and smartness, be it 2030, 2040. What is your key message to the audience from given your expertise and background and your remit as well? Maybe I should start with Emmanuel, because he was the man who introduced the concept of the mission in the first place. So,
yeah, the concept of moonshot.
The moonshot, indeed, yeah.
We fly to the moon not because it is easy, but because it's difficult. And I will comment at the same time to demonstrate that it is feasible on the pandemic and the impact of pandemic. Because when I discussed with my colleague in charge of sustainable development at Bouygues, because I had to deliver a speech as representative of Bouygues 1 year ago, 1 year and a half, he told me the first message, and I appreciated the statement of Lisa of Stockholm, is to minimize the constrained transportation needs, to minimize the constrained movements in the city, so to try to promote distant working and so on. And it was quite infeasible. And in 2 weeks, time, it was feasible suddenly, and we didn't expect that it would be feasible. And I have colleagues who were against distant working, and I feel now that it is more productive than the traditional way. So we have big challenges. I think the mission is a very big challenge, but thanks, unfortunately, COVID-19 has helped us to see that what is impossible is in fact possible, and under better conditions. I think with the help of the citizens of all the municipalities and very active cities, which will be an example for those who have no experience in this field, we can help make our continent the best place to live, I would say, in the world for 2050. So it was my conclusion.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Fantastic moonshot. Peter, so I'm just following the images on the screen, so it's not because I just top right for me. Just keep it brief because we only have three minutes left.
Yeah, I would say it's collaboration. I mean, now it's imperative that we continue to collaborate if we're going to deliver against these huge outcomes. And though it might not be in the traditional way of collaboration where we all get together for a little while, it's imperative that we all learn lessons learned and best examples and keep sharing information both between the public sector and the private sector and the public sector and the public sector. So, across member states and across divisions.
Cheers for that. Elina.
So did you say Elina?
I said Elina.
Oh my, you're not going in the right order, I see.
Oh no, it's just
no worries,
maybe your order is different.
I manage this. I would say, if I want to make it short, I would say engagement. And it means engagement of every stakeholder for the big work, because urbanization, and in that sense, cities have very significant role in the carbon neutrality and sustainability targets in Europe. And yes, engagement. Thank you.
Super. Thanks, Elina. Steve.
I think I'd say impact first. Think about impact in all respects. Concentrate on scaling up. Don't just think about one-off. And to do that, you need platforms that both develop projects. That's the big gap, how you get from idea to project. And also platforms that link projects to money, wherever that money comes from, private, public, wherever. So impact, excellent. Scale, platform.
Lisa.
Yeah, I'm hopeful. I think this Climate City contract part is really something that will help us to reach the goals. We need that push from the Commission, and I think it's good to have some 100 cities going ahead and helping all the other cities to follow.
Super. Thanks, Lisa. Hopeful. Then Jens, the man who represents the organization that makes this all possible, I guess. So I think you have the final word.
Oh God. Be it the experience, be it the instruments, be it the communities that are already intensively working on this, and don't wait. Everything is the solutions are. Sorry. So again, act now, because the solutions are there, but I mean the time is not there anymore. So we don't have the luxury of waiting another decade just to see how we might start something. Really go into it because the stuff is there, and we need.
Okay. It's this sense of urgency.
Yes.
Thank you so much. It's exactly 3 o'clock on my clock. Probably in the UK it's 2 o'clock, I suppose. In Finland maybe even later. So I really want to thank all the panelists. I think we succeeded in keeping to time. Very interesting contributions. Maybe of an unexpected mix of elements. We had a mission, we had a taxonomy, we had a private investor, we had 2 cities, and in between we had the Commission as well. And I think those ingredients, if you put them into the mix, I think the key messages coming out of you in the last 3 or 4 minutes may even become a reality as well. So really want to thank you. Stay safe, and hope to see you in the flesh at some point in the future. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thanks.
Great.